Well, hello everyone, we are back.
Hello.
It has been extremely hot here in Southern California for the past week and a half, and I think it's going to continue on for a couple more days, unfortunately.
It's been awful.
Yes.
A little bit more of an informal video today. We were actually planning on filming this in a different location, like maybe outside, but like Naveen said, it is really, really hot.
Yeah,
here.
even at night, like when you open the windows, it's like, I don't know if this is any better.
Yeah. We haven't been sleeping well.
No.
It's awful. So we resorted back to the good old table, fireplace combo. So here we are. Over the weekend, we went to our local convention called Strategicon. We talk about that convention a lot on our channel. It's a local convention that happens about 3 times a year here in Southern California, basically over all the long weekends.
Mm-hmm.
And so we played a few games, and we just wanted to basically talk about them.
Yeah, it's mostly a play-focused convention, so it's really nice to go. It's held for 4 days. We typically go for about 3 of those 4 days, and there's a big open area where you can play a bunch of games, and we had the opportunity to play some that we were not anticipating.
Yes. And we figured it's been a while since we just talked about games, not reviewing them or anything. So we're not reviewing any of these games right now. We're just going to be talking about how our experiences went.
Sure.
Before we went to the convention, it's funny, I packed all of these like new games that we got at Gen Con. I read through the rules of most of them, and we played almost none of them. I think we played none of them. Right?
Yeah, maybe actually. Yeah, maybe we didn't.
You can't really plan that sort of thing. It just kind of whatever game pops up, and we ended up playing a few games off of our shelf of shame.
We did.
So it's not a bad thing, actually.
No.
That was really, really nice. So let's get right to them.
Sure.
The first one is the first game that we played at the convention, actually, and it was with a couple of friends of the channel, Nate and David. And so this is...
Yes, this is a game that came out back in 2000. This is the Princes of Florence.
Look at that.
We have the original version. So the copy that we played was the second edition, which came out like 10 years after this one came out.
Yeah.
And this is an
auction
tile laying game. It's very Euro, and it's a good game. Like,
well, it's designed by Wolfgang Kramer.
Yes.
So he's a well-known designer, as well as Richard Ulrich, and it's published by Rio Grande Games and Alia. And so, like Naveen was mentioning, there are several editions of this. I think there's actually a new edition that's going to be coming out this year.
Yeah, after looking up, when we sat down to play, we're like, what year did this come out? So we went to the BGG listing, and then we saw a completely different cover, a third cover.
Yeah.
So this is the this is the vertical first edition. There's a horizontal second edition.
Yes.
And then now there's a cartoony
right?
edition. I don't know what's going on with that, if that's going to be an SN release or not. And I'm not sure if there's any updates to the components or anything, but this is just fine.
Speaking of the components, I will say the cover does not do anything for this game because when you open the box, the components they're pretty nice. I thought that the artwork and stuff on the actual components and the board are much nicer than the cover.
For 2010 Euro, I had no complaints with it at all.
Yeah, and so if you've never played this game before, this is it's an auction game.
It is,
where you are trying to fulfill these cards. Basically.
Yeah, it's like it's an auction, tiling, order fulfillment game.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. That's pretty much exactly it. And that combination sounds like it would be weird, but it works. And it feels like a classic Euro, but with fresh mechanics that you don't really see in newer games, right?
Yeah, so at the beginning you have an auction phase, and somebody is going to be the auctioneer. There are several different types of things that you can auction off, whether it's like landscapes or scoring cards, different things like that. And once somebody has won something in the auction, they are no longer allowed to win anything else in that round's auction. So everybody's going to get something. So you're kind of... As the game progressed, this is our first time playing, we realized, like, wait, sometimes you want to put stuff up that other people are going to want.
Right.
So that they get the heck out of the way when it's your time to go buy something
and you
that
can
you
buy
really
something
want.
For really cheap.
For cheap, yes.
Right? Because all auctions start at a minimum of 200.
Right.
And you can only increase, when you bid, you can only increase it by 100 increments.
Yes.
So it's not like you can just outprice someone immediately.
Right, meaning like if the starting bid is Monique 200, I have to bid 300 or say I'm out.
Yeah, and once you're out of that specific item to auction. But everybody gets something each round. And so each player has their own player board as well, where you're building out sort of like an estate.
A town grid.
Oh, is it a town? Yeah, I guess that makes sense
Florence.
because you're building like a library. Oh yeah, you're building Florence. That makes sense.
Yeah, parts of Florence maybe.
Yeah, so you're building parks and like a library. You might build a lake. I think there's like a museum, a university. So you're building all these things on your board. There are certain rules for placement. And this is all in an effort to fulfill these, I forgot what they're called. Works?
Works, yeah, I think something like that.
And basically the work the works card will have a list of items that it wants you to have. It's always like one type of building, one type of freedom, like philosophy or something.
It's like opinions, religion.
That might be a little bit too specific.
Freedom to travel.
Yeah, it's just an aspect of the game. And each round, there's a certain minimum point value that you have to meet in order to score that card.
Right.
And as you play throughout the game, it gets harder and harder to meet. The threshold gets higher and higher. I think towards the end of the game, you're like, you have to score 16 points on a card in order for it to score at all.
I think the very last round is 17 points. And so the best scoring that you can get is one building amongst all these things is 4 points. So you have to kind of crawl and scrape and scrap your way to get to the minimum points requirement.
Yeah.
But also you don't want to just hit the minimum because there is a reward for being the person in a round who has scored the most points. So it's like almost like the rich get richer in those kind of situations.
Yes, that's
What's really unique about this game is when you get your victory points from scoring, you could either take it all in points, which obviously is the point of the game, or you can take a combination of it in points and money. Meaning you can then use that money that you're going to use into the next rounds so that you can outbid your opponents.
It's interesting. Yeah. I enjoyed it a lot. I did really, really bad. I got crushed in this game, but I really liked it. I think the very first work that I scored, I took it all as money. And I thought, like, this is great. I'm going to have so much money for the rest of the game. But I think that hurt me in the end.
Yeah,
potentially.
It could be. I mean, it really depends on what happens in those auctions. Like leftover money at the end is nothing. It's the tiebreaker, but nobody's playing for the tiebreaker when people are lapping the board, several times.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, it was an interesting game. I think all around the table we all enjoyed it. We were the only new players to the game, and it was our first game for the con. Yeah. So there you go. We got one game off of our Shelf of Shame.
Shelf of Shame, Princes of Florence.
Yes. And by the way, we're not going to be able to go through every single game that we played because we played quite a few, but these are some of the notable ones, right? So the next game that we played is another one off of our Shelf of Shame. We actually brought this one with us.
We did.
And we were able to play with the brothers Murph, who attended for the day.
That's right.
So it is
none other than Firenze.
Yes.
This is a tower building game where you are going to be drafting different colored rooftops to try to build.
Yeah, bricks. They're bricks.
Yes, that look like
they look like rooftops.
Yeah, they got this little thing. Yeah,
I can see
they don't
why
look like
you think
bricks.
that.
Yeah. Anyway, you're trying to build them out before you get squashed by the game.
Yeah. So this is designed by Andreas Steding, and this is published by Quinted Games. I don't remember when this game came out. It's an older one.
This is the reprint that came out back in I think 2018, and then the previous one came out 2010, maybe right around that time.
Yeah, so this is a game that I had actually played a long time ago when I was first getting into the hobby. And then Naveen, the reason why we have all these Shelf of Shame games on our Shelf of Shame is because there was a time where Naveen was kind of just picking up, right?
Yeah,
picking up things that you thought looked interesting.
This looked interesting.
And so you may also notice the similarities in box artwork, the trend, the brown.
This is the 2018.
Yeah, and so Naveen hadn't played it. But because it had been so long since I'd played it, I didn't really remember what the game was like. All I remembered was you were building different colored towers to basically just fulfill the requirements and score points depending on how tall they are. So I read through the rule book and then I went to teach it. But when I was reading through the rule book, I didn't actually read through any of the action cards. So I didn't realize how mean this game is.
Super mean.
It is so mean that it was comical. Like we were just like laughing at how ridiculously mean the game is.
And it's almost like it's not mean because the players are doing it. It's like
you have to.
The cards are just making it happen.
Yeah. Because the way that the game works is every turn, there is a card row in front on the game board. And every single turn, you have to start your turn by taking one of those cards and potentially paying the cost in bricks or whatever if you want to choose which card to take. But some of the cards are events. And some of the events are stuff like, every player who has a tower under construction must destroy their tower if they can't discard a certain color combination on the same tower, something like that.
Yeah,
it's just that constantly, you're like building up, and then you have to destroy your entire tower, and it's not easy, to build these towers.
The game itself is once you start constructing a tower, every single round you must either score it and be done with that tower, or you have to continue to contribute to it, otherwise it crumbles on you.
Yes.
So you have to constantly have upkeep of this tower so that you can score meaningful points. Because sure, you can score 2 or 3 points, but you want to build towards those 5, 6, and 7 points. So if you get into a situation where an event happens where it's like discard three tiles, you're like, but that's the tile I need when it comes back around to me to keep going. Yeah. And so I felt like in a 4-player game, at least, you're kind of a sitting duck. Like you do this action, you spend resources to get the ideal card for yourself. You don't do anything negative to anybody else. You build on your tower, and then all of a sudden you have to survive player 2, 3, 4.
Right.
And somehow player 4 does something that is a global event that doesn't affect them, but it affects you.
Yeah.
Then you're just kind of like, I had nothing to mitigate that. I had no opportunity to mitigate what was happening there.
That happened a lot to Naveen, constantly. So the scores were really wide. I lost the game by 2 points. I think Nick
2 points,
took it by 2 points, and we both also happened to just. I don't know about Nick actually, but me, I know I was able to dodge a majority of the events.
Yes.
Not by any strategic planning.
Yes, it just happened to work out. Yeah.
Happened to work out that I didn't really get hurt by them, and Naveen was constantly hurt by them.
Yeah.
So
Mike had the same situation as me, where it was like, we're playing the game and like, I don't know why we can't get any points going here. And it's just like, so there was like 2 scoring tracks. It was like me versus Mike versus Monique versus Nick.
Yeah,
and it was pretty apparent
opposite.
like after like the first or second round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Naveen, now that you've played it,
verdict is nay.
Nay. It's not going to be on the shelf for much longer. So anyway, that is Firenze.
Another game that's kind of on our shelf of shame. It's technically a shelf of shame because we never opened it after we bought it.
Yeah.
But we had played it once before.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah, it's a game that plays well at higher player counts,
Yes.
so it's kind of hard to play just the 2 of us.
Right.
It is none other than Mission Red Planet.
Yeah.
This is the 2nd edition, and we got to play Did we play a full 6?
We played
a
five.
A 5-player game, yeah.
So it definitely is better with higher player counts.
Yeah,
5 or 6.
4 and up, yeah. I would say.
And this game was it was actually in shrink for years on our shelf because we had played this game when we were first getting into the hobby. We thought, oh, this is fun. You know, we're first getting into the hobby. It's one of those a lot of player interaction kind of games.
It's a simultaneous action selection area control game where you're essentially trying to put your astronauts on these different ships and get them off their docking station and into orbit and down onto Mars to the different locations of Mars so you can try to score points at the end of 1, 2, or 3 rounds.
Right.
Yeah.
This is designed by a famous designer. Who is it again?
Bruno.
Okay, it's the Brunos. It's Bruno Faiduti and Bruno Cathala.
Yes.
And it's published by Fantasy Flight, I think. I don't know what year this came out, but it's not.
This is the 2nd edition, so I'm
old.
not sure. Yeah.
So within the past 10 years or so. But like I was saying, this is a game that we had first played when we were first getting into the hobby. We thought this is a neat game, picked it up, and then didn't play it for years.
A long time, yeah.
So we saw it on the shelf, and we figured the best time for us to get higher player count games played is at conventions like Strategicon. So we played it, and it was chaos. It was fun. It was a fun group. But basically what happens here is everybody has a hand of cards, and this is the action selection mechanism. They're an identical hand of cards. They're numbered 1 through 9, and they're basically characters. And each character lets you do a different thing. So one character might be like, place 1 astronaut on a docked ship, and those are ships that haven't launched yet.
Yep.
And destroy a ship that's still docked.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Or it lets you move your astronauts who are already on Mars. And so Mars itself is divided into several different zones. And in the different zones are face-down resource tokens. And the tokens are going to be valued at either 1, 2, or 3 points, depending on the type of resource. Yep. You don't know what resource is in each zone until the first person to step in that zone does that.
Discovers it. Yeah.
Then they can flip it over. And for the rest of the game, you know what the resource is there. So there are going to be 3 times during the game where resources are produced. And then whoever has a majority in each of the zones gets all of the resources in there, if they have an outright majority.
Right.
If there's a tie, then the tied players split the resources. There are also events that can happen, which can change what happens in the game quite a bit.
Yeah, there's like cards that you as an individual can slip under the different portions of Mars, so it can change the dynamic of what is going on in that particular terrain or that different zone at the end of the game.
Yeah.
So like Monique played a card. Was that you that played that card there?
No, I think it was
somebody played a card to this one zone, and we all thought it was like everybody was bailing from that zone. So we're like, oh, that must be something really bad there. So there's kind of this like chicken element that can happen there, and you don't want to spend one of your cards or one of your actions just to go figure out what that face down card is that's manipulating that area of the board. It's a really interesting game. I thought it was really fun when you play with the right group of people. It's not one that I'm sure we're going to keep long term, but it's definitely one that's probably going to stay on the shelf for just a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's quite chaotic. And I think that it's probably best played when you play quickly, because otherwise there can be some downtime that can make the tempo of the game a little bit weird. The thing that's kind of neat about it is when everybody simultaneously chooses a character card from their hand. So whoever the first player is starts counting down from 9, and they'll say like 9, and then everybody who's played the character number 9 flips over their card, takes their actions. 8, and you basically go down to 1, and that's how each round works. So it is a strong mix of chaos and strategy. And yeah, it's a nice family weight game. So I would recommend this for families who play at higher player counts, or just anybody who wants kind of like a medium to lightweight simultaneous selection kind of,
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean about if everyone plays fast, it's a more enjoyable experience. Because I definitely felt like there was a couple times where there was a little bit of downtime where I was like, we just need to get to the next phase of this game. We just need to move it along. So, I can see why I did have like such an appeal towards the game though when I first got into the hobby, because you're looking at new mechanisms. Like simultaneous action selection was not something that I was familiar with. Area control I was a little bit more, but manipulating kind of the different the docked ships and things like that, and kind of try to outweasel or outsmart your opponents. That was something that was like fresh and inventive for me. So now,
innovative.
6 years later, playing this game, it's
Feel
kind of
like
different. Yeah,
you're ready to move on or something.
Yeah, I think so.
So that is Mission Red Planet.
Yep.
And the last sort of new to us game that we wanted to mention is a game that was introduced to us from a friend who came all the way from Chicago. It was lovely being able to spend time with you. And it is a Polish game called Koleka.
Yep.
It was really interesting. We don't have a copy of it here, obviously, so we can't,
demonstrate it or show it off.
Yeah. But it's basically an older game, I think based off of a supply chain issue that was going on in Poland
in the 80s.
In like the 80s, right? It really, he was saying that it was really, really bad during the 80s, but it was something that happened during an extended period of time. Where basically they would go to stores, the people in Poland would go to stores trying to get bread or clothes, anything, and they didn't even have any idea as to whether or not those stores would have those items that day.
They would line up with the hope that stuff was in stock, and so obviously in the 80s there's no internet, you can't check things out and try to figure out like, oh, what's in stock. So people would physically line up and either find what they needed or it wouldn't be, and it'd be better luck next time kind of thing.
Sounds awful.
Sounds awful,
by the way. Yeah, they made a game that was sort of a criticism on that time period, but for the people who actually went through this, that sounds awful.
Yeah, apparently this game is really popular, or was really popular for a period of time in Poland itself, because the people obviously experienced it, and so that's what we were told by this friend. And so we finally got to play it. It's been something that I didn't know about before the con. Did you know about it?
No, I'd never heard about it before. It was really neat. It's basically a game where you're lining up all your meeples in literal queues. Like they're lining up in these different storefronts. Each player has their own card that has like a shopping list of things that you need to fulfill. And the first person to fulfill their shopping list wins the game.
Yep.
But the problem is you put all your meeples in these stores, and then you see which stores are going to get what for the day. So you might be lining up your meeples for a store that's not going to get any shipment.
Yeah. And first in line, when the store's open, gets first dibs on the goods that are in that particular store. So you might have lined up, third, but that store only got 2 items. So now you're going to have to duke it out and fight for positioning in line. So there's a lot of like line cutting and jumping.
That's where a majority of the game takes place. There are 2 issues. The first issue is there are speculators who are the black meeple, and they basically steal the item when they get to the front of the line to sell it to the black market.
To the black market, yeah.
And then the second issue is every player has a hand of action cards, and the action cards are stuff like move your meeples to the front of a line, or take the entire queue and flip it around so the person who's at the very back is not at the very front.
Yeah.
And we're each playing 1 card at a time until we pass.
Right.
It's hilarious because it's so random, and if you can just kind of imagine these people in a less serious, situation, just kind of like line jumping each other and trying to get things. It was really funny.
Yeah, it was a fun game. We played with 5 people, and it was recommended to us to play it at minimum 5. 6 is even more chaotic. It became very, very tense though towards the end of the game.
Yeah.
Like the shopping list objectives is public knowledge, so everybody knows like, okay, Monique needs 3 clothes.
Yeah.
She has 2 of them. We cannot let her get her 3rd clothes. So
Close the store.
So
that was
close
an
the
action
store,
card.
or can I get myself in position so that I get the clothes, so that I can go to the black market and maybe trade it in, or maybe it's something that's conflicting. I also need 3 clothes, so I can't let you kind of get first dibs on this. So
Yeah, rude.
there's a lot of tension in the game in that sense, but it's also very lighthearted,
Yeah,
and I think it was
very.
intended to be designed that way.
Yeah.
And to kind of be like silly and like a satire as to what was going on at the time.
It is a very silly game. The card artwork is very silly. There are newspaper clippings because there are events that happen every day. So it is a very silly game and definitely a really fun experience. So I'm glad that we got to try that.
Yeah, sure.
In addition to those new games, we also played a few games that we've already played before, right? Including a really long, intense game of A Feast for Odin with the Norwegian expansion. Of course, we are gearing up to play that. We've been gearing up for a while, but this was a nice rude awakening because it turns out that we're not as good at that game as I hoped.
I took some, if you're familiar with that game, I took some chances with some islands, and it didn't pan out. Yeah.
At the end of the game, Naveen had like 4 islands, and none of them were filled.
None of them were
Don't do
filled.
that.
No. I got positive points and some negative points out of it, but I ended up in dead last.
Sometimes it's okay, you know, to take these islands, but yeah.
One island to me came completely free. So like it was worth something. It had money on it that accumulated over time. And then it had some negatives. And if you did the math on the positives to the negatives, it was completely zeroed out. So it was fine.
But it was really, really fun. It was a very long game, but a really, really satisfying one. We also played a few games of Yokai Septet, which we actually have a copy of the new version now because the publisher, Ninja Star Games, they're local and they always have a booth typically set up at Strategicon. So we were able to see him there and he gave us a copy of the new version of Yokai Septet, which for those of you who backed the Kickstarter, it looks great.
It does, yeah.
I mean, the difference between the version that we have and the new version is all of the 7s, which of course is the most important card in the game because those are what you want to win. They all have this kind of foil, shiny bit on them.
Yeah, I don't even. There's a word for it. I can't remember exactly what it is.
Foil trim, something like that. We're the worst board gamers. But they have that on the 7s, and so it just makes the 7s pop out more. So that when you have them in your hand, you know, like, hey, this is the big deal. Got to win that, right? So we're able to play a couple of games of Yokai Septet, and of course,
we introduced it to a couple new players, and they all enjoyed it. It's a great game. It's one of our favorites.
And last but not least, we played a game that we've actually been wanting to talk about for a while because we were sent a review copy of this little card game from Pandasaurus called The Game. And ever since we started playing it, we played it so many times that we had to get rid of the box because it was destroyed. And we moved it to a Ziploc bag.
It works. It functions. We get the rules in there.
There you go.
Yeah, this is one of those games where there's very limited communication. It's fully cooperative, and essentially there are cards that go from 2 to 99, and there are 4 different piles of cards. You're gonna have 2 piles that are gonna be you're gonna play cards ascending, and 2 piles where you're gonna be playing cards descending. And so the goal of the game is to try to get through the entire deck so that you can win. If you do not do it, or if you cannot legally place a card, then you lose. We have won many times in this game, and we've also lost many times in this game.
Wait, but the kicker in this game is, you know, both piles are either going down or going up, and so you want to slow down the pace of those piles, or else you're going to, you know, definitely lose.
Yep.
And so what you can do is, for example, if you have a pile that's increasing in value, if you have a card that is exactly 10 less in value of the card that's on top of that stack, you can play that card to basically slow down the progress of the stack.
So if there's like a 16 showing and you have a 6 and it's your turn to play, you can play the 6 to kick it down 10. So
and the reverse is true for the other pile that is decreasing in value. If you have a card that's exactly 10 higher than the one on top, you can slow that down too.
Yeah.
So it becomes this puzzle of like, oh, we need to stay alive, we need to stay afloat, so please try to get those 10s, and you can have those moments where you play out your entire hand because you have like a combination of, oh, I'm going to play that, then I'm going to play this because it's 10 less than this card that I played, right?
Right. Yeah, so this one, it's by the same company that did The Mind.
Yes,
this is Pandasaurus Games. And so The Mind, there's like no communication. It's all just a kind of body language communication. In this one, you can actually communicate, but you can't actually communicate what is in your hand.
Yes.
You can say like, hey, leave that second pile alone. Like, please let it be mine.
Although Naveen tends to really push that rule. You basically cheat.
I say, is it a no-brainer? No-brainer?
Naveen's like, how close of a no-brainer is your card? But how close?
I'm just saying, like, you think about it, like, don't get too aggressive there. You want to be careful. It's a really, really fun game.
It's fun
for sure. Like, dominates the mind for me.
Yeah, by the end of the game, when everybody only has like 2 or 3 cards left in their hand, then it can become the mind basically, because you don't know. On your turn, you're required to play at least 1 card. For a majority of the game, you're required to play at least 2, but by the end of it, you're down to 1. And so if you cannot play a card on your turn, you're
toast.
The whole game is lost
The game's
because it's a
over,
cooperative game. If you haven't gathered that, so this game does get compared to the mind a lot, I'd say, but. For the both of us, we both enjoy this one more, right?
Yeah, big time, 100%.
Yeah, we play this so much, especially at 2. It's just such a fun activity to try to beat it. It's just this puzzle, right?
This is in that like Cabo category for us, where it's like easy to teach, easy to play. We've played it 40 times, 50 times,
it's
and
really
it's
fun.
Not getting old.
The packaging is probably the worst part of the game.
It is
I think
tore
it
up.
basically came broken. So we had to immediately move it into a
It came in a
bag.
strange box that's like, it's like, this thing's always going to tear after a couple plays.
It came in, it was the same complaint that I had about Cabo, the first edition, because it comes in one of those like end cap, like if you go to like Target or some retail store where they have the card games that are on the thing, where you slide on the thing.
Yeah, end cap.
Yeah, it came in one of those boxes, and those boxes are like broken upon arrival.
Yeah.
So that is probably my only complaint about it. Other than that, it's so fun.
And it's called The Game. So
Yes.
it's going to be a little hard to search the game, but The Game.
Anyway, that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed just hearing us ramble about the games we played over the weekend. We have quite a bit of things coming up over the course of the next few weeks to a month, because we're going to be traveling soon for Essen Spiel.
Yes.
But we'll hopefully post a vlog or so before we leave.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you all so much for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more like this in the future, please consider subscribing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.